You won a trip to the Caribbean in a sweepstakes. Well, if that's the case, Mommy and I are going. You're staying behind. Got it. If not, we're getting divorced, Andrew declared, his threat of divorce hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. His mother, standing beside him, wore a smirk of triumph, relishing the moment. I couldn't let this blatant manipulation slide. No, I would concoct my own special revenge against this conniving mother-son duo. My name is Lillian, aged 32, just your average working mother at some nondescript company. Andrew and I had been married for 2 years. I had stumbled upon him, 2 years my senior, through a mutual acquaintance. Romance was never my forte. I hadn't dated much during college and my post-graduation relationships hadn't panned out. Before I knew it, I was 30, and my concerned parents had begun seeking potential matches for me. Andrew appeared on the scene, a composed and caring individual with a strong devotion to his parents, a trait that resonated with my own values. Thinking perhaps I could forge a connection with him, I agreed to marry him. Our wedding was a smooth affair, celebrated by many, and initially, our union seemed to be pure bliss. About 6 months into our marriage, my phone began to ring incessantly, each call bearing Andrew's name. With a sense of urgency, I returned his call, only to be met with his strained voice on the other end. "Please try to stay calm," he began, his words heavy with distress. "It's about Dad. Something's happened to Alfred. He collapsed at home and has been rushed to the hospital." And then, it hit me like a wave. The sudden news of my father-in-law's passing was unfathomable. He had always been the epitome of health. The shock was palpable, not just for me, but for everyone involved. Following Alfred's passing, Andrew's attention shifted drastically towards his now solitary mother. He became excessively attentive, visiting her daily, sharing meals or accompanying her on shopping trips. He even took special leave to embark on a trip with her. It wasn't that he neglected me, but whenever our plans clashed, his priority was always her. "Sorry, Lillian, Mom just called and she needs me," he would say apologetically. "But we had plans," I'd protest, feeling the sting of disappointment. "She's feeling alone," he'd reason. "You don't mind, do you? You can go to the movies alone, can't you?" "I'm fine," I'd reply, though inwardly resentment brewed. Why was I the one being held accountable? Wasn't Matilda the one making demands? Regardless of Andrew's apparent devotion to his lonely mother-in-law, it's evident that he's a mama's boy. Yet aside from this recurrent issue with his mom, our marriage was tolerable. I presume this was simply the norm for married life. My personal refuge. Solving crossword puzzles with enticing prizes. They provided solace whenever Andrew abandoned me for Matilda, and occasionally, I'd score gift cards or delectable treats. Then came the day I clinched a pair of tickets to the Caribbean, the grandest prize I'd ever won. I meticulously verified my victory multiple times, consumed by exhilaration. The tickets necessitated specifying the travel companions before contacting the airline. Contemplating who to bring, Andrew naturally came to mind, but hesitations lingered. He often jetted off with Matilda, and if I proposed the trip together, she might insist on tagging along. After careful deliberation, I resolved to gift the trip to my parents. As I made my way home, I swung by my parents' place to share the thrilling news. "Mom, guess what? I've won tickets to the Caribbean," I announced, brimming with excitement. "Oh goodness, that's wonderful news. You and Andrew must be thrilled," Mom responded, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Not quite," I replied with a grin. "I've decided to give them to you and Dad." "To us? Are you sure?" Mom exclaimed, clearly taken aback. "Absolutely. Andrew's always traveling, but I want you two to have this experience," I reassured her. "Thank you, Lillian. We're beyond grateful," Mom beamed, her excitement palpable. Dad, however, appeared deep in thought. "Dad seems troubled," I observed. "Well, work's been hectic lately. It's not the best time for me to be away," Dad explained with a furrowed brow. "That's unfortunate," I acknowledged. Then Dad suggested, "Why not take Olivia instead? After all, it was your prize originally, wasn't it? Enjoy some quality time together." Mom's face lit up at the idea. "That sounds lovely." Feeling elated and increasingly excited, I applied for leave the next day, which was promptly approved. I wasted no time contacting the airline to arrange for my parents to use the tickets. On my way home from work, I stopped by a bookstore and purchased a guidebook for the Caribbean trip. It had been far too long since Mom and I had gone on an adventure together, and I couldn't wait to make new memories. But upon arriving home, I was met with an unexpected sight. I'm home, I called out upon entering, expecting to find Andrew, but instead discovering the house illuminated by lights. Oddly, there were women's shoes at the entrance rather than Andrew's. Contemplating this, I was met with the sight of Matilda as she swung open the living room door. "Lillian, do you have any idea what time it is?" she scolded. "Oh, Matilda, I didn't realize you were here," I responded, taken aback. "It's not just about me being here. Coming home this late, what have you been up to?" "Andrew will be back any minute now," she continued, her tone accusatory. "I'm sorry, I'll start dinner right away," I offered, hoping to diffuse the tension. "It's not just about dinner, is it? Making the bed is basic common sense for a daughter-in-law. Do you even take your role seriously?" Matilda questioned sharply. "I apologize if things have fallen short because of my work. Perhaps you should consider being more dedicated to your home," I retorted, feeling the weight of her disapproval. With Matilda living nearby and holding a spare key, her unannounced visits were a regular occurrence. Embracing traditional beliefs about a daughter-in-law's duties, she clearly disapproved of my full-time job. Her constant nitpicking and criticism made it difficult for me to warm up to her. As I began preparing dinner, Matilda suddenly exclaimed, "Hold on. What's this, Lillian? Are you planning a trip to the Caribbean?" Surprised, she had unearthed the newly purchased guidebook from my bag. "Matilda, why are you going through my things?" I protested. "That's beside the point. What's this about the Caribbean?" she demanded, her tone sharp. I had won the trip in a sweepstakes, intending to gift it to Mom. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone yet. Our argument was abruptly halted by Andrew's arrival. Matilda rushed to him, pointing an accusatory finger in my direction. "Andrew, listen to this. Lillian's been utterly thoughtless." "What's going on, Mom? Did Lillian pull one of her stunts again? A Caribbean trip, planning to give it to Olivia without even consulting me?" "What Caribbean trip? This is news to me too," Andrew demanded, glaring at me. "It's quite simple. I won the trip and thought of giving it to my parents. But since Dad can't go, you're going with Olivia," I explained calmly. "Yeah, so what's the problem? You're always traveling with Matilda," Andrew retorted. "It's not the same. Mom and I only go on domestic trips. We haven't been abroad in years. How could you decide this without even talking to me? It's my prize. Why should I have to?" I protested, feeling my frustration rise. Andrew slammed his hand on the table, cutting me off. "You're getting too bold for a daughter-in-law. Mommy and I are going. You'll stay home." "Mommy?" I couldn't hide the disdain in my voice at Andrew's juvenile choice of words. "Wait a minute. This trip, you've had enough of it. If you're not happy, let's talk about divorce," Andrew declared sharply. "What divorce?" I was taken aback, unable to comprehend his extreme reaction. Threatening divorce over something so trivial seemed absurd. Fueled by anger, I fired back, "I earned this trip fair and square. I've already made up my mind to gift it to my own mother. Can't you pick up on the signals for once? Mom wants to go. Where does it end with prioritizing Matilda? You never take my feelings into consideration." "I don't care how you feel. Like I said, this trip is for Mommy and me. Stay home and behave." Andrew dismissed me coldly. My affection for Andrew waned rapidly in that moment. It was clear that in his eyes I ranked lower than Matilda. I couldn't continue to tolerate this absurd dynamic between the two of them. Keeping my composure, I told Andrew, "Fine. Do as you please and enjoy your trip." "Humph, you should have listened to reason from the beginning." "Suit yourself." Always being argumentative, Andrew huffed in response. The Andrew I once knew, kind and understanding, seemed to have vanished, and there was Matilda, wearing a smug smirk of victory. It was then that I made up my mind to leave the house while they were away on their trip. I resolved to let Andrew and Matilda have this time together. The following day, I reached out to the airline to inform them of the change in travelers, substituting Andrew and my mother-in-law. However, the operator's response carried a note of concern. "I'm sorry, but once the participants are confirmed, we're unable to modify them," they explained. "Is that so?" I inquired, a sinking feeling settling in. "Yes. Additionally, this airline ticket stipulates that the original winner must be present. If your husband and mother-in-law are listed, the ticket will be rendered invalid," the operator clarified. "So, if I don't go, the ticket serves no purpose," I confirmed. "Correct. Please refer to the documents we provided, outlining this specific condition," they advised. Upon reviewing the documents, I discovered a clear statement. Only the winner was authorized to use the ticket, and it was non-transferable. Relaying this information to the operator, I made the decision to decline the trip without informing Andrew and Matilda. Instead, I resolved to let them make their own arrangements for travel at their own expense. That evening, upon my return from work, I broached the topic of the Caribbean trip with Andrew. Andrew, about the trip to the Caribbean. Yeah, you've contacted the airline, right? Informing them that Mommy and I will be going, he interrupted. I did make the call. Here are the winning documents and the tickets. I only need the tickets. I won't bother with the documents, I explained, handing them over. There are detailed instructions in those documents. Considering it's an international trip, it might be wise to give them a read, Andrew suggested cautiously. I don't see the need. Mommy and I know what we're doing. We're efficient, unlike you, he asserted confidently. Fine, whatever. I'll leave them here just in case. I relented, sensing it was futile to argue further. As I anticipated, Andrew neglected to read the documents, leading to a debacle on the day of the trip. After confirming his departure, I swiftly packed my bags and made my way to my parents' house. While unpacking as expected, I received a call from Andrew. As soon as I answered, he erupted, "What's going on? They're saying the ticket can't be used." That's correct. If the winner doesn't travel, the ticket becomes void, I explained calmly. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Andrew demanded, his tone accusatory. I did tell you. Remember? It would have been wise to read the instructions. I reminded him. You mean it was in those documents you gave me? Andrew realized with frustration. Exactly. It's your responsibility for not reading them, I replied matter-of-factly. This is ridiculous. How are we supposed to get to the Caribbean? Andrew panicked. Well, the operator did mention that if the winner doesn't travel, you'd have to pay the full price, I informed him. The full price? Andrew exclaimed, clearly caught off guard. In the background, I could hear Matilda's voice, indicating they were both distressed. Andrew, what did Lillian say? Matilda's voice interjected. Mommy, if Lillian doesn't have to pay for the trip. Andrew began, but I didn't catch the rest of his sentence as he handed the phone to Matilda. They can sort it out themselves, I heard Andrew mutter before ending the call. After ending the call, it wasn't long before Andrew rang again. Hello, I answered. What's going on? I'm busy, Andrew snapped. It's not what's going on. I tried to purchase the tickets, but the credit card isn't working, he exclaimed in frustration. Huh? I don't know anything about your card, I responded, puzzled. It's not mine, it's your card, he clarified. Oh, so you're saying you used my card without my permission? I realized with a sinking feeling. Just fix it now, Andrew demanded impatiently. I recalled checking my wallet earlier that morning and discovering my card missing. Suspecting the worst, I immediately froze it. I knew you took it, I accused. Are you kidding me? I was planning to use that card for shopping abroad, Andrew retorted defensively. Always causing problems, you jerk, I seethed with anger. You freaking witch, Andrew fired back, showing no remorse for his actions or for taking the trip. It was yet another instance of him prioritizing himself above all else. I can't deal with this anymore, I declared, my frustration boiling over. A jerk? Who are you calling that? After constantly belittling others, you can just go to hell. Andrew shot back defensively. What? Who are you talking to like that? I countered sharply. Who do you think? Your constant reliance on Mommy is honestly creepy. If you love her so much, why don't you two just stick together? I can't handle being married to a mama's boy like you. There's no point in us being together. I lashed out, my words dripping with disdain. Hey, calm down. If you keep this up, we'll get a divorce, Andrew warned. Fine by me. I've been thinking the same thing, I retorted, my anger flaring. With that, I stormed out of the house with no intention of returning. Let them enjoy their time abroad in the Caribbean. Maybe they'll both sink, they and Mama's boy. In a fit of rage, I hung up and blocked both Andrew and his mother. Determined to end this toxic relationship, I sought legal advice from a firm recommended by my father and initiated the divorce process. Upon reviewing our savings for asset division, I made a startling discovery. Our joint account had been emptied. That was the shocking discovery I made upon reviewing our joint account. There were numerous withdrawals, all coinciding with Andrew's trips with his mother. It became evident that he had used our savings to fund their travels in addition to unauthorized charges on my credit card. Demanding compensation, I insisted on a significant sum. However, Andrew's financial situation quickly spiraled into debt, and he found himself hounded by creditors. The once indulged mother, now constrained by our actions, witnessed her relationship with Andrew sour, their interactions fraught with arguments. The irony wasn't lost on me, considering his past behavior. Meanwhile, I made the decision to reside with my parents for a period. Recognizing the concern I had caused, I was determined to repay their kindness by living with them and attending to their needs. Marriage held little appeal for me now. What truly mattered was the love and support of a caring family. Through the tumult of divorce, I found solace in this realization once again.
My name is Susan, and currently I find myself balancing a demanding career while raising my only son, Ethan. Despite getting married, my passion for work has not waned. As the president of a small company, I had no concerns about a salary cut upon returning from maternity leave, thanks to a reliable team handling my business during the hectic times of childcare. However, there is another issue weighing heavily on my mind, something more personal and challenging. It revolves around my mother-in-law, Dorothy, my husband, James, our son, Ethan, and I live in a house. Ever since my father-in-law passed away, Dorothy moved in with us. Initially, we thought it would be temporary, but Dorothy showed no signs of leaving. One day, I mustered the courage to ask Dorothy, "How long do you plan to stay with us?" In a dramatized manner, she raised her voice and began to cry, accusing me of trying to kick her out. I was taken aback by her reaction, feeling a mix of surprise and confusion. James, who overheard our conversation, rushed to Dorothy's side and comforted her. After Dorothy stopped crying, James asked her to go to her room, leaving me alone. He immediately glared at me and accused me of being cold to his mother. I clarified that I didn't intend to tell her to leave, but James interpreted my inquiry differently, concluding that I was in the wrong. Reluctantly, I backed down, wrestling with my thoughts about Dorothy staying for an extended period. I was curious about when she would leave but felt unable to ask directly due to the fear of emotional repercussions. Dorothy behaved as though the house were her own, showing little regard for my comfort. One unexpected day, she made a startling announcement. She decided to relinquish her ancestral home and transfer all her belongings to my house. A moving truck driven by Steve, a friendly but straightforward mover, pulled up in front of their house. I was speechless with astonishment, my mouth agape in disbelief. On that day, supposed to be special for Ethan with a planned family outing to the amusement park, James disrupted the plans by declaring it a day for unpacking. Ethan, anticipating the amusement park visit, glanced between me and James with a near-tearful expression, seeking reassurance about their plans. I found myself comforting my son in the midst of the unexpected changes. I reassured Ethan, "Don't worry, Ethan will definitely go to the amusement park." However, James frowned, questioning, "Are we really going to play instead of unpacking?" I firmly responded that a family trip to the amusement park had been a long-standing plan, emphasizing that breaking a promise to our child for unpacking was unthinkable. I stood my ground, believing in the righteousness of my stance. The planned visit to the amusement park had been set over a month in advance. We had prepared various things and were looking forward to spending this day as a family. Spending time together was crucial for us. Yet, it was a complete surprise to hear that my mother-in-law was suddenly moving into our house. Moreover, being told that today was the day for unpacking left us bewildered. I prioritized our family plans above all. It's my policy to cherish the bond with my family. However, my mother-in-law reacted emotionally to my decision, crying excessively and claiming, "Susan doesn't want to live with me. That's why she's prioritized her own child over me." Steve, the mover, realizing the conversation wasn't progressing, asked, "Well, unpacking can be done anytime. Isn't keeping a promise with your family more important? Also, did you actually inform your daughter-in-law about the move?" Perhaps embarrassed by Steve's rational words, my mother-in-law's face turned red. My husband, James, just glared at me, uncertain of how to react. It seemed he preferred to prioritize packing for his mother over going to the amusement park with our son. Nevertheless, I took Ethan's hand and headed to the park as promised, creating a clear rift between my husband and me. One day, my mother-in-law casually broached the subject. "Hey, Susan, could you possibly stay home this upcoming weekend?" Seemingly oblivious to any plans I might have already made, a surge of irritation welled up inside me. Yet I strived to maintain composure in my response. "Why do you ask?" I inquired, striving to mask my annoyance with a tone of neutrality. She expressed her desire to spend quality time with Ethan, claiming that I was always around him, making it unfair for her. It was apparent she had eavesdropped on my earlier conversation about a mall outing plan with Ethan for the next weekend. She began to assert that I should avoid joining them at the mall, suggesting a scenario where James, Ethan, and herself would go, leaving me to oversee the house alone. I responded, "If you're keen on visiting the mall, why don't we all go together?" I suggested, hoping to strike a balance and not let Ethan out of my sight, especially not with Dorothy, whose trustworthiness had been in question since the day I witnessed her faint tears. Dorothy's expression morphed into a mix of reluctance and disappointment. She was jarred by my proposition. Voicing her displeasure was not an option, and with evident reluctance, she nodded in agreement, conceding to the new plan. At the shopping mall, I was selecting clothes for my son, Ethan, just as I had planned. Recognizing that children grow up fast, I picked out slightly larger sizes. Suddenly, my mother-in-law, Dorothy, came over and said, "Don't you know his size?" This size would fit Ethan perfectly. She had chosen a size that fit Ethan just right for the moment. I tried to explain that kids grow quickly, and it's better to have a bit of room in their clothes. However, Dorothy quickly retorted, "When he grows, just buy new ones. Don't be so stingy." I was internally taken aback by her attitude. Continuously buying perfectly fitting clothes would be a waste of money, and our family budget couldn't afford such frequent purchases. I resisted. But then my husband, James, intervened, saying, "I'm paying the bills. If you're stingy, it reflects poorly on me." Ultimately, James paid for the clothes Dorothy had picked out. Afterward, Ethan wore those clothes for a while, but in just a few months, he started complaining that they were too tight and stopped wearing them. Dorothy saw this, and her face showed a mix of emotions, a complicated blend of realization and disappointment. Deciding to sort out the unnecessary clothes overflowing in our home, many of which were no longer in use, I chose to give them to a mother friend of mine whom I got close to at the daycare center attached to our company. She was delighted to receive them, and seeing her joy warmed my heart. However, my use of this daycare center seemed to be something my mother-in-law couldn't come to terms with. She didn't try to hide her critical attitude towards me, challenging me with a stern tone. "Why would you leave Ethan with someone else when I'm right here at home, and working while having a child? That's detrimental to his upbringing." Her words pierced deeply into my heart, but I felt the need to firmly state my position. "Actually, I need to work too, or our finances wouldn't make ends meet," I replied, yet with a firm resolve. My mother-in-law further criticized me, saying, "Just how much do you think your earnings amount to? I'm sure James brings home much more than you, so you wouldn't need to work for us to live comfortably. You must be incompetent at your job," she accused. Her words deeply scarred me, and at that moment, I wondered if James had ever mentioned to her that I was the president of our company. Frustrated with this realization, I felt the need to find a new way to navigate this complex relationship with my mother-in-law. "I actually earn more than James, mother-in-law," I said, my voice laced with a mix of confidence and a hint of sarcasm. Little did I know this remark was about to ignite a fiery response from Dorothy, my mother-in-law. "How dare you speak like that, daughter-in-law?" Dorothy raised her voice, a blend of shock and anger seeping through her words. "To openly undermine your husband is unforgivable. Not only does she barely manage to care for our child, but she also has James assist with the household chores. And now she boasts about earning more than her husband. Can't she even show the slightest respect for him? James wouldn't struggle a bit without you around." Dorothy's voice grew louder, filling the room with her indignation. Hearing the commotion, James entered the room, a look of concern etched on his face. "What's going on?" he asked, sensing his son's presence as a form of support. Dorothy continued with even more vigor. "Tell me, James, you don't need Susan, do you? If it were just you, me, and Ethan, we could live happily. This woman's presence only makes our lives more constrained, doesn't it?" James, slightly taken aback, responded hesitantly, "Ah, well." His lackluster replies seemed to fuel Dorothy's resolve. "Then let's go for a divorce," she exclaimed, retrieving a divorce form from the shelf. It appeared that Dorothy had been harboring the intention of suggesting a divorce to me and James all along. Internally grappling with the turmoil, I came to the realization that I no longer needed a husband who prioritized his mother over his own family. However, I was determined not to give up custody. James shouted angrily, "Everything about you is unbearable. You are no longer needed in our family of 3, his voice trembling with anger, symbolizing the collapse of our years-long marriage. Longing for freedom from this house, or rather this relationship, I responded calmly, "I understand, James." With a steady hand, I signed the divorce papers, marking the end of our relationship. Our family consisted of me, my husband James, and our grown son Ethan. However, ever since my mother-in-law Dorothy moved in, the tension in our home had been escalating. Disregarding our plans, Dorothy forced me to help her unpack her belongings, ruining Ethan and my eagerly awaited trip to the amusement park. When I began preparing for the move, she abruptly took James on a hot spring vacation. Ethan had been invited, but having witnessed her mistreatment towards me, he declined, preferring to stay with me. He was still upset about how Dorothy nearly canceled our amusement park plans. Respecting Ethan's decision, James and Dorothy left for their trip, leaving us behind. During their absence, I packed only mine and Ethan's belongings and had them transported by the mover Steve. In my decisive letter, I informed James that he would be responsible for the $4,000 monthly rent for this house henceforth. I also mentioned hiring a lawyer for the custody battle and property division. Leaving the letter on the table, Ethan and I stepped into our new life. Upon their return from the week-long hot spring vacation, James and Dorothy contacted me immediately over the phone. James exclaimed, "Susan, did you really take Ethan with you? Mom is upset. Shouldn't I have custody?" His voice was a mix of anger and surprise. Realizing he hadn't read the letter I left, I asked James gently, "Could you please read the letter I left on the living room table?" The living room, a space she had designed with great care, radiated warmth. He harbored serious concerns about the content of the letter. If it's that letter, Mom said she'd check it first, and she's already read it," James responded, a bit bewildered, often taking his mother, Dorothy's word for everything. I explained the contents of the letter. "It says that you will be responsible for the $4,000 monthly rent of this house going forward. It also states that I won't give up custody of Ethan, and regarding the division of property, I'll contact you after hiring a lawyer." $4,000, James exclaimed in shock, standing frozen. He was aware of the rental status of their home, but had not grasped the actual amount. His cavalier attitude towards financial management had always been a source of stress for me. This house was a rental costing about $4,000 monthly, which I had initially opposed living in. However, James had been adamant about this house, throwing a fit in an unbelievable manner, and I eventually gave in, with him pushing the responsibility of paying the rent entirely onto me. I found myself shouldering the burden of paying the monthly rent, which amounted to approximately $4,000, while James was expected to handle other living expenses. However, James had a habit of spending money without planning, often leaving me to cover the bills. This lack of financial responsibility extended to his mother, Dorothy, who frequently miscalculated her expenses and would call me over at the checkout when she realized she didn't have enough money. I was deeply disappointed with their inability to manage money. James would spend on his hobbies and desires before prioritizing living expenses, leaving me exhausted from his financial oversights. I had contributed my entire salary to the household for a long time, leaving me with very little for myself and making life extremely challenging. Recently, the burden intensified with increased expenses for Dorothy's food and allowance. The prospect of divorce meant shedding the hefty $4,000 monthly rent. Fortunately, the house was in James's name, sparing me from future responsibilities toward him and Dorothy. However, when I asked James to continue paying, he exclaimed, "Why should I pay? I don't live there anymore, and we're divorced. Dorothy even told me to leave the house, so I have no obligation to pay rent." In desperation, James pleaded for my help, but Dorothy intervened, confidently declaring, "Even without you, we can manage the rent. The amount you paid is nothing for James." I was flabbergasted, knowing that James, with a net income of around $2,000 and hardly any savings, could not afford the rent. Dorothy seemed under the impression that James was still financially well off, leading her to mistakenly believe in his abundance. Realizing the impracticality of their situation, I urged them to consider canceling the lease and discussing it with the real estate agent. Dorothy snapped back, dismissing my concerns. Frustrated, I hung up the phone, contemplating how James and Dorothy could provide a stable environment for raising a child. Ethan and I had recently moved into an apartment in a convenient neighborhood close to my workplace, creating a comfortable living environment. About a month after my divorce, James and Dorothy unexpectedly showed up at my workplace, causing a scene at the company's entrance and demanding to see the boss, which was me. I, who was out for lunch with Ethan at a family restaurant, was taken aback when I returned with him, only to find Dorothy and James causing a commotion at the reception. The child care center inside the company allowed me to have Ethan clothes even at work. The sudden appearance of James and Dorothy left me bewildered, especially since I had been waiting for a response to a meeting arranged by their lawyers. Dorothy, with tears that seemed more manipulative than genuine, pleaded with me, "Susan, can't you just come back home? I understand you are the one providing financially, but enough with this soul killing. It's time to put an end to this." It was clear that Dorothy believed her tearful act would work on anyone besides her son. She was intent on painting me as the villain in this situation. In response to Dorothy's pleas, James chimed in, "Hiring a lawyer? What were you thinking? This is a matter between us as a couple. Ethan would surely be happier with both his parents together." Despite his words, a father who prioritizes his mother over his own son only adds to the child's sorrow. Sighing deeply, weighed down by inner turmoil, I turned to James and said firmly yet calmly, "We're divorced. We're strangers now. If you have something to say, please do it through a lawyer." Upon hearing this, James seemed to realize that talking to me was futile. He turned to our son Ethan, who was standing beside his grandmother, and began speaking. "Hey Ethan, you'd prefer to stay with your dad and grandma, right?" James said, attempting to sway Ethan. "Absolutely, it must be lonely just with your mom always busy with work," added the grandmother, chiming in with her own persuasive tone. Ethan, seemingly frightened by this exchange, hid behind me and burst out crying loudly. "I don't like you both, you're mean." His pure tears were far more impactful than the grandmother's feigned weeping, resonating strongly with everyone around. Employees from nearby offices quickly gathered, responding to the commotion. They ushered James and the grandmother out of the company, restoring a semblance of order. Relieved at being freed from this distressing situation, I let out a sigh of relief. Later, through my lawyer, I warned them that if they ever showed up unannounced at my office or followed me and Ethan, I would consult the police. This warning seemed to calm them down. James and his mother, who were previously living in a house costing $4,000 in rent, had to let go of their luxurious lifestyle and move into a modest apartment. But the real tragedy for James was just beginning. He had been boasting to his colleagues about living in a lavish house, and now, terrified of them discovering his downgrade to a humble apartment, he quit his job without consulting his mother. This abrupt decision infuriated his mother. Eventually, they both had to start working out of necessity. Despite their new jobs, they spent their days blaming each other for losing Ethan, engaging in bitter arguments, and struggling to pay child support while trying to make ends meet. It was a challenging situation for them. As for me, I've been doing well in my job, and despite the absence of a father, Ethan has grown into a sturdy and reliable young man. In my heart, I always believed that even without such an unreliable father figure, I was capable of raising this child admirably. I am Christina, and I am 32 years old. Steve and I have been together for 6 years, and I love him very much. I wanted to marry him my whole life and asked him to marry me several times, but each time he politely said no. But he finally agreed to my 5th request not long ago. Right now, we're busy getting ready for our wedding by making plans and picking out clothes. But even with all of this work, every day is fun, and I hum songs without even realizing it. Then one day, while I was happy, a prenuptial agreement was put in front of me. Steve had said that this agreement was needed in order to get married. What was agreed upon was that what belonged to each of us before we got married would stay the same. We would not mess with what the other person gets in the future, and we would update this document if our family situation changed. Steve, are you really worried about this? I asked him as he signed the paper. Well, it's just for peace of mind, just in case, he said. It's important for both of us, I believe. But I was more excited about the days ahead with him than I was about why he was so set on this deal. But a small event was about to happen. Steve has 2 older brothers who are a bit strange. Steve told me not to believe what those 2 said when I met them before our wedding. They're a bit odd. Don't worry about it. In his words, the people who will be my in-laws gave a small, unclear smile. I almost forgot about them because I hadn't seen them in a while. Then one day, while Steve was at work, I got a call from a number I didn't know. Chrissy, you like fish, right? This call from my brother-in-law, whom I had only met once, caught me off guard. What is this? I knew that Chrissy was my nickname, but who was it? I knew it wasn't a stranger because they called our home phone. It was a voice on the other end of the line that made me think of what it was. Haha, you don't know who I am. I'm Steve's brother and your new older brother. What kind of brother-in-law? What is it? Steve has 2 brothers, but this voice belonged to someone else. It has been a while. What took place? I asked but was still not sure what to do. He told her, today I went fishing and caught a lot of salmon. It's okay for me to bring a few, but I can't bring them all. Steve will love them with lemon. It made my heart beat faster when he spoke. That's great news. I could make a dish that Steve loves. Steve has to work today, but I think he'll be very pleased if he comes home to a tasty meal. I quickly went to the kitchen after hanging up the phone. I have salt and lemon. Right then, let's make a tasty dish. I was feeling great as I was getting the ingredients ready when the doorbell rang. My brother-in-law must be there, she said. I knew the face when I looked at the computer. Someone from Steve's family showed up. It was his younger brother. He looked a little tense when I opened the door. Excuse me, may I use the bathroom? Could you also pay for the taxi? As he said this, he ran into the house quickly. Huh, okay, I said as I gave the cab driver my money. He felt better when he got out of the bathroom and took a deep breath. Thanks, you saved me. Oh, and could you lend me some money too? He smiled and put out his hand. Huh, what is the money for? I looked at him a little confused, and he laughed. The fish is not free. How about $50? He asked in a relaxed way. What? I was so shocked that I almost dropped my wallet when I let out a loud scream. I thought the fish was just a treat for everyone. Of course, I felt bad taking it for free, and I had planned to buy him a snack to say thanks. But $50, that was a surprise. From the look on my brother-in-law's face, it looked like this price was normal for him. He'd arrived from a long way away to give it to me. The fish was still fresh. I didn't want to say anything that would make things worse. It hurt me a little to do it, but I took $50 out of my pocket and gave it to him. Thanks, the fish is in the fridge. Also, I'm leaving the fishing tools here. Steve has been asked to bring it home later. Thank you. After that, he quickly left. Huh? Are you already leaving? Kevin, wait. I was shocked to see the cooler and gear left at the door, but he was gone in an instant, waving a $50 bill. It's odd that the stuff was left here. It won't fit here. I forgot to pay for the cab. I thought about the cab fare I had paid for him, and it looked like I was having a hard time. It feels weird to ask Steve to carry this. How do I bring up the cab fare? What was even more surprising was what was in the cooler. After I calmed down, I planned to make a dish. I said, "What?" When I opened it, "What is this?" There was only one small fish on top of a lot of ice. I couldn't move because I was so shocked. "What is this, then?" I had no words to describe how shocked I was. I was excited about getting a lot of fish because of how my brother-in-law talked. I was so excited that I cut a lemon. I could only sigh when I saw the lemon I had cut with joy. A few months later, I went to a nearby small cafe. Don't tell my younger brother, but I need to talk to you about something. The urgent call came from my husband's older brother. His voice sounded urgent. Listen, I need to talk about something important, but I can't tell my parents or brother. He said that over and over again. I was a little nervous, but the chosen cafe was warm and bright, and it was daytime, so I thought everything would be fine. "Christina, come over here," he called out loudly as soon as I opened the door. Other people were staring at me, which made me feel bad, so I quickly walked over to his table and looked down. "Look at that blush, Christina. You're so cute." My brother-in-law's smile made my cheeks get even redder. "Let's have a little more peace and quiet." He waved his hand and said, Okay, when I told him this in a whisper. Then he introduced me to the woman sitting next to him. I said, "This is my new girlfriend." A beautiful woman dressed in style stood up and looked at me. A low voice asked, "What's this about?" Just as I was about to meet her, the next thing I knew, I got hit in the cheek. I was shocked and couldn't figure out what had happened. Someone from the crowd just hit me. "Why?" The angry woman in front of me yelled. "Is this your new girlfriend? She's so annoying," and stormed out of the coffee shop. "James, hold on. What kind of joke is this?" It hurts a little on my cheek. My throat dried up from being so shocked. "Actually, I had a fight with my girlfriend," my brother-in-law said without any thought. "I thought about getting a new girlfriend instead of you and stopping our relationship." He laughed and said, "Thanks to that, it's all over now." Are you kidding me? This is something I never thought would happen. I began to get annoyed by how carefree he seemed. "Well, these things happen," he said with a wave of his hand. "It's not a big deal." I've never had anything like this happen before, though. How can I keep my cool? I spoke up. Honestly, I was so angry, shocked, and embarrassed that I couldn't think straight. My brother-in-law then told me, "Don't be so mad. It's not important." It shocked everyone. But was it really that shocking? As I looked around, I saw that everyone was looking at me. As I felt the looks of shame on other customers' faces, my cheeks burned. Because I felt bad, I looked down. My brother-in-law saw this as a chance and stood up, smiled, and said, "See you later." I said hello to my brother for me, and I left the store. Hold on. Have a few more things to say, I yelled, but he was already out of sight, so he couldn't hear me. A staff member with a worried look on their face stopped me from going after him as soon as I stood up. "Excuse me, may I have the check?" As they gave me the bill, they said that was really the only thing that came to mind. It's been getting worse between me and my in-laws lately, so I was thinking about staying away from them. In my heart, I felt both powerless and angry because I had so many problems at once. After telling my husband everything, we agreed not to respond to any messages from his brothers. If they needed something, they would have to talk to my husband about it. I then chose to ignore the several texts I got after that. The happiness didn't last long, though, because my in-laws' 60th birthday party was coming up, and I had to go. I've always felt welcome with them, and I loved them as much as I loved my husband's parents. My mother-in-law said, "Wow, it's so big. And that separate room over there is so pretty too." Seeing her have fun made me feel better. This house would be great for the party if I could pick it. The in-laws wanted a traditional house that I got from my grandparents not long ago. That house is a classic house that is 230 years old and was moved. When my grandparents lived there, it was always busy. I talked about it with nostalgia. The first time I met my wife, it was also in such a traditional place, my father-in-law said as he thought back. It turned out they met while looking at old homes and having tea together. They found out they were both the same age. In fact, this house was a restaurant before my grandparents moved into a nursing home. My mother-in-law made me feel better by telling me today was special and the place was perfect. She felt bad that she hadn't invited them sooner. Those words made my heart a little warmer. They looked at the house and yard for 2 hours before the party started. During this, the oldest brother came in, making a lot of noise and looking a little unhappy. "What is this? We're having lunch in such a quiet place, and Steve is the only one here to greet us." The oldest brother said, "That's surprising." Steve answered with a smile. "This is what Mom and Dad want. They wanted to spend time with their family in a cozy place. This lunch is a special one from a well-known shop in the area." I remembered how excited I had been for that lunch when Steve said that. The second brother spoke up with a worried look on his face and said, "Even if it's a special lunch, it's still lunch. In such a lovely house, shouldn't we have gotten fancier food? Steve, aren't you being too cheap? The rent for the house must have been pretty high. Today was for my in-laws, and I thought we should honor their requests. The first time, I wasn't reimbursed for the taxi price when I was only given a small salmon, nor for the costs at the shop where I got into a fight with his ex-girlfriend. But after that, my oldest and second oldest brothers kept nagging Steve and me and sometimes made jokes about it. Steve kept up his normal calm and gentle attitude through it all. I love that about him a lot." My oldest brother smiled and said, "Hey, I just thought of a good idea." We were having a great time talking. Life has some strange turns sometimes. Steve looked at me with a slightly tense face, as if he felt the same way. After that, the oldest brother whispered something to the second brother. The two of them laughed out loud, their eyes shining. "Are we family?" The oldest child smiled and said, "There's a way to make this special day even more special." At that moment, the oldest brother looked at my husband and asked, "Has this place already closed down?" He said, "Yes, it has," in a soft voice and with a shocked look. Then my excited brothers-in-law came up to us. "Wait a minute, are you implying that you're the one who brings in the money?" The biggest brother yelled, "What, yes?" And the second brother smiled. "You're so lucky to live in such a beautiful place and have such a big house." "Wait, do you not understand something?" My husband cocked his head in surprise. However, my brothers-in-law went on. "It was the second brother who begged, 'You can't keep this wonderful place all to yourself. Would you share it with us, sir?' asked the oldest with a smile. I got what they were trying to do and had a thought. "What do you need?" I laughed and asked. They looked at me with wide eyes, probably thinking about the things that belonged to our family. I couldn't just do what they said. I didn't receive this house, so it's not my husband's. My husband has always been there for me, especially when it came to my fortune. He told me many times, "If there's a problem, talk to me. Remember to follow the rules of our prenuptial agreement." My brother-in-law's behavior was even worse when I thought about how kind and honest he was. "Isn't this place in the most beautiful spot anywhere? You can get anything you need with just a short walk. Isn't this house a little too big?" The oldest child said, maybe we should let our younger brother's family live here, which was a lie. We don't have to meet anymore if you don't agree. After taking a big breath, I said, it's okay. They were shocked. That's it. If so, can our younger brothers live here? Yes, of course. Said with a smile. Not just for the second oldest brother, but also for you. I hope everyone likes the house. These are the keys. When I gave them the keys, my brothers-in-law's faces lit up right away. That's it. We're very thankful. Yes, Christina. Thank you so much, she said. They walked around the house happily, while my husband asked, are you sure about this? He did so with a slightly raised eyebrow. I grabbed his hand. Don't be afraid. I've given it a lot of thought. After a few days, our intercom rang urgently while we were relaxed in the living room. When they opened the door, my in-laws looked scared. Why is this taking place? We didn't know that the house was going to be torn down. They held up a warning to tear down the building. Oh, that was planned, I said in a calm voice. They were shocked and asked, why? I told them, there will be a new apartment building built there. In order to do that, the current house has to be torn down. They were dumbfounded as they looked at me. I also said, the high-end restaurant has been offered to move because it is in such a great spot. While the 60th birthday party was going on, I left it alone, but today is a big day for it. They looked at each other worriedly. Seeing how surprised they were made me feel a little better. Is the house really going to be torn down? Are you sure? I smiled and said, yes, I am. So you might want to get back any important things soon. Everything inside will be thrown away. When they heard this, their eyes got even bigger. I added, given how busy the construction site is, work might start soon. As I looked out the window at the big machines, it's safer to take your valuables now. After a short pause, they quickly began to talk about it, asking, is this real? Are we going to move quickly? As I watched them run off, I looked at my husband. I said, it looks like they really didn't know. My husband smiled and said, I guess my parents and I thought it would be good for them to get a little shock based on what we've learned from the past. But we may have caused the workers trouble. The house keys were given to my in-laws? That's true. I told my husband and his parents the right way to go about telling them about my plans to move into a new house. Of course, I also told them that the house had been bought and gave them information about the date of the handover. They could have told the brothers the truth, but it looks like no one did in the end. Don't stress out about the workers. He told me, I've already talked about it with them. I thought this might happen, so I told the worker ahead of time. We said a few words. I hope he regretted, and then went to sleep. I couldn't believe it had come to this the next day. When we got to my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law's Mings and my upset brothers-in-law were there to greet us. Even if the contractor didn't let you in, what were you thinking trying to sneak into the house at night? Well, it turns out that they tried to sneak into the house during the day, but were turned away. So they tried to get their valuable things at night. A neighbor thought this was odd and called the cops. Not only did you not get your things back, but you were also stopped by the police. My husband said in shock. Yet, even though the in-law boys were eager to explain, their parents only said, you both should say sorry. My husband gently gave them advice, and they didn't seem like they wanted to say sorry. But the oldest brother replied, what? With a hint of anger. But all of this is because of Christina. The second brother added, I thought you were nice, but I was wrong. I didn't understand why you gave me the keys so quickly. But when you did to the house, shocked me. Could only smile when they suddenly complained. Brothers, it looks like we have a misunderstanding. The truth is that I received both the land and the house. We talked about this before I got married to Steve. I've always said what's mine is mine, and we even made a big deal about it. So really, it's not your place to step in. A contract, I asked. The in-laws looked shocked, though. I chose to make things clear. There have been many ideas about what to do with the land since my grandparents' time, but they always wanted to keep it the way it is. On the other hand, they told me I could sell it in the future, which I confirmed with a skilled builder. It's not your business, then. But we're family, so why do you think it doesn't matter to us? Before I answered, I thought about a lot of things. About 3 years ago, I really began to think about getting married. Since my mom died soon after giving birth, my dad raised me with a lot of care on his own. Together with my dad, we were like best friends. We went camping in the summer and on ski trips in the winter. Unfortunately, those happy times came to an abrupt end when my father fell and died. Being overloaded, I felt bad that I couldn't do anything to help him and sad that the room was empty where he used to be. At that time, my husband was there for me and supported me through my dad's funeral and the memorial events that followed. Because I couldn't leave the room I shared with my dad, my husband would make me soup and listen to me talk about my dad all night. I want to marry you so badly. You've thought about me and been on my side all along. I told him during my 5th approach, if there's something you don't like about me, I'll fix it. He then looked upset and brave as he told her, I want to marry you, but my family is having problems. I don't want to give them to you. Steve, I told him, I really love you, and I don't care about any problems in your family. We then chose to get married. I have no regrets at all. I wanted to do what my grandparents wanted, and I'm happy that I did. His boys, on the other hand, were a different story. I can't believe how cocky your brothers are. I can no longer forgive them. I made it clear they will pay for everything they've done. Taxi fares, expensive food bills, payment for slapping me, the price of our tea at the cafe, home utilities, the cost of calling the police, and everything else. Steve said. His brothers turned pale. Even for that, that's not possible. Then there was an even bigger surprise. You're rejected, their father told them. What? Dad, please don't. This caused their parents to kick them out of the house. Even cousins who lived a long way away knew about their bad behavior. The brothers' women and families left them because they had lost their place. They now seem to live in peace and quiet in a small room. Is this our new house? Is it really possible to live here without any problems? We moved into a fancy high-rise house next door to Steve's parents. Of course, we agreed to buy this floor in the building before we could give up the land. It's great that we can live close together. Some of my grandparents' old house, like the beams, were used to build our new house. A new picture of our family was taken. Let's put this picture up next to the old ones. The picture showed my family's happy faces. I told myself, from now on, I'll treasure the smiles of this family